hall was buzzing with excitement, filled with a mix of nervous energy and anticipation. Rows of seats stretched across the large room, packed with people who had come to witness the country's most talked-about music competition. Cameras and lights were set up everywhere, catching every detail of the event. The sound of tuning instruments and whispers of the audience created a background hum that made the atmosphere almost electric. On the stage, the famous maestro sat at a large wooden chair, his posture commanding attention even without a word. His reputation was known by everyone present. He had built his career on precision, skill, and an unyielding standard for music. Young musicians dreamed of impressing him, and many feared the sharpness of his criticism. The teenage girl sat backstage, gripping her sheet music tightly, her heart racing. She had dreamed of this moment for years, imagining every possible outcome, from the thrill of applause to the sting of criticism. Her fingers were trembling slightly, but she reminded herself that she had worked hard and was ready. She peeked through the curtains and saw other participants practicing their pieces. Some were calm, moving their hands over their instruments with ease, while others were chewing their lips, shifting nervously from foot to foot. She took a deep breath, trying to absorb the energy without letting it overwhelm her. Memories of her long hours of practice flashed through her mind. The early mornings when no one else was awake, the late nights when her hands ached but she continued anyway, the encouragement from teachers and the quiet pride of her parents. All of it had led her here, and she refused to let fear take over. The announcer's voice echoed through the hall, calling the next performer to the stage. The girl's stomach tightened, and she felt a wave of anxiety mix with excitement. She could hear the faint applause from the audience as another contestant took their place. Watching them, she felt a strange mix of empathy and competition. Everyone was in the same position trying to make their best impression. She reminded herself that this was not just about winning but about showing who she was through her music. She adjusted her posture, straightening her back and lifting her chin. The maestro's eyes were sharp, scanning every corner of the stage and the performers, and she knew he could see every little detail, every twitch of nerves or slip of the hand. But she also knew that he could see talent when it was real, and she hoped that what she had worked for all these years would shine through. Her turn was called, and the air seemed to thicken around her as she walked toward the stage. Every step felt heavier than the last, but she kept moving, focusing on the music and the rhythm she had practiced countless times. She could hear the murmur of the audience quieting down as she approached the instrument. The bright lights made the edges of the hall blur, and for a moment, she felt as if she were in a bubble, separated from everything else. Her hands hovered over the keys, and she closed her eyes for a brief second, taking one last deep breath. Then she began to play. The first notes flowed out smoothly, the sound filling the hall in a delicate, clear stream. She felt herself becoming one with the music, the hours of practice guiding her fingers naturally across the instrument. But as the piece went on, she noticed the maestro leaning forward slightly, his eyes narrowing, his face unreadable. She tried not to let it distract her, keeping her focus on every note, every pause, every gentle rise and fall. The audience watched silently, their attention fixed on her small figure at the stage. Some leaned forward in their seats, captivated by the contrast of her calm determination against the tension in the hall. She could feel the energy of the room pushing her forward, lending strength to her performance. Every measure seemed to pass more quickly than the last, and before she knew it, she had reached the section she found most challenging. Her hands moved carefully, every movement deliberate. For a moment, a small mistake slipped through, barely noticeable to most of the audience but immediately caught by the maestro. He raised an eyebrow, his expression tightening, and a quiet, sharp sound of disapproval escaped his lips. The girl felt a jolt of panic but did not stop. She reminded herself that one slip did not define her entire performance. With a deep, steadying breath, she continued, letting the music carry her through the rest of the piece. The notes flowed, sometimes soft and tender, sometimes strong and determined. She poured her emotions into every sound, hoping the audience could feel the honesty behind her performance. As she finished, The hall remained quiet for a heartbeat longer than she expected. Then, applause erupted, loud and enthusiastic. The girl looked up at the audience, surprised by the warmth of their response. She could see smiles and nods of approval, some even standing, clapping with admiration. But when she glanced at the maestro, she saw his eyes sharp and his expression critical. Despite the applause, she knew that he was ready to voice his opinion, to dissect every note and movement. She felt her stomach twist, knowing that whatever he said could sting. But she also realized that this was a test, not just of her skill, but of her ability to handle pressure, criticism, and scrutiny. She straightened her back, lifted her chin, and prepared herself for whatever words would come. The announcer stepped in, thanking her and inviting her to leave the stage as the next performer prepared. She felt a mix of relief and lingering anxiety. Behind the scenes, she took a moment to let her body relax, letting the adrenaline flow out slowly. She knew that the performance was only the beginning, and that the real journey was just starting. Somewhere in her mind, a quiet voice whispered that this was her chance to prove not only her skill but her resilience and determination. The hall continued to buzz with performances, and she could hear the maestro discussing the previous act with his team, his voice carrying a weight that commanded attention. She found a quiet corner, sitting down and trying to focus on her next steps. She reviewed the music in her head, thinking about the sections that had felt tricky, and imagining how she could approach them differently if needed. The teenage girl understood that every musician in the competition faced the same pressures, but she also knew that her approach, her dedication, and her willingness to keep going would set her apart. Her eyes glanced at the stage, watching the next participant prepare, and she felt a quiet determination grow within her. No matter what happened, she would not let the fear of criticism stop her. This moment, this hall, this stage, was where she would begin to show the world her true potential. And deep inside, she felt a spark of hope, knowing that her journey was just beginning, and that the music she carried within her heart was ready to speak. The teenage girl stepped off the stage with a mixture of relief and lingering tension in her chest. The applause still echoed in her ears, warm and encouraging, yet she could not shake the image of the maestro's sharp gaze, his judgmental eyes that seemed to pierce through every part of her being. Backstage, the other contestants were whispering among themselves, exchanging glances, some impressed by her performance, others unsure how to react to the sudden clash between talent and criticism. She tried to steady her breathing, feeling the residual tremor in her hands. The maestro had a presence that could overshadow anyone, and she knew his words would soon arrive, cutting through the applause like a cold wind. The announcer stepped forward, calling the next performer to the stage, but the girl barely registered it. Her mind replayed every moment she had just played, analyzing every note, every pause, every subtle rise and fall in the music. Then it happened. The maestro spoke. His voice carried through the backstage area, sharp, precise, and unforgiving. "That was acceptable but hardly extraordinary," he said, his eyes narrowing as he addressed the girl directly. The room seemed to hush, as if the air itself had become heavier. The words stung like an unexpected cold splash of water. She had imagined criticism, yes, but never so public, so cutting. A wave of heat rose to her cheeks, not just from embarrassment, but from the mixture of disbelief and frustration. The other contestants watched silently, some exchanging sympathetic looks, others clearly intimidated by the maestro's authority. She took a step back, her hands tightening around her sheet music, trying to anchor herself. She reminded herself that she had worked tirelessly, that she had poured her heart into this performance, and that one person's harsh words could not define her worth. But the maestro was relentless. He continued, gesturing with his hands, pointing out slight errors, phrasing that could have been smoother, dynamics that had not fully expressed the emotion of the piece. Each comment was precise, almost surgical, and each one felt heavier than the last. She could feel the eyes of the audience, still lingering backstage, and the gaze of her peers, some of whom had looked up to her. She wanted to shrink, to hide, yet something inside refused to break. In the midst of the humiliation, she began to focus not on the pain, but on the opportunity. Every critique, however sharp, contained a lesson. Every pointed finger and word of disappointment was a chance to improve, to rise above the moment, to prove that her music was more than a single performance. Her mind raced with possibilities, replaying the sections the maestro had highlighted, imagining ways to refine them, to take control of the music that had seemed so fleeting in the spotlight. One of the assistant teachers approached her, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Don't let it get to you," they whispered, their voice steady and calm. "You played beautifully. Remember why you are here. Remember what you want to show the world." She nodded, swallowing the lump in her throat, feeling a mixture of gratitude and determination. The maestro had seen the cracks, the small moments where she faltered, but he had not seen the full potential that still lay within her. Backstage, she took a moment to breathe, to ground herself in the music rather than the criticism. She remembered the countless hours spent alone, practicing, feeling the music flow through her, connecting her fingers to the notes, connecting her heart to the sound. This was more than a competition. This was a test of resilience, of courage, and of inner strength. As she observed the other performers, she began to notice patterns. Some were overly cautious, stiff with fear, their eyes darting toward the maestro for every hint of approval. Others were bold, fearless, but lacking refinement. She realized that true mastery required balance, a combination of technical skill, emotional depth, and the courage to stand firm under scrutiny. She returned to her seat, flipping through her sheet music, but her thoughts were not on the notes alone. They were on the emotion, the story behind each movement, the connection between the music and the performer. She replayed her own performance in her mind, recognizing the parts where she had hesitated, the moments where uncertainty had crept in, but also the sections where she had allowed herself to truly express her passion. She decided that humiliation would not define her. Instead, it would fuel her. Every word of critique became a spark, igniting determination to rise, to grow, to conquer not just the piece, but her own fear. The maestro's voice echoed again, this time addressing another contestant. She listened, observing how he highlighted strengths, how he dissected weaknesses, and she began to understand his method. He was demanding because he saw potential. He pushed because he believed in the craft, even if his approach could feel cruel. In that moment, she realized that facing him was not just about surviving criticism, but about learning to thrive under pressure, about understanding the standards of excellence he represented. Hours passed as the competition continued, each performance a mixture of triumph and struggle. The girl remained vigilant, observing, analyzing, and mentally rehearsing her own music. The earlier embarrassment was no longer just a wound. It had become a teacher, revealing vulnerabilities she could transform into strength. She found a quiet corner, closing her eyes and replaying the challenging sections in her mind, imagining the sound she wanted to produce, the precision, the depth, and the emotion. Her focus sharpened, turning anxiety into preparation. Outside the hall, the sky had dimmed, and the light filtering through the windows created long shadows on the floor. The hum of the audience had become a steady background rhythm, almost like a heartbeat she could sync with. She began to feel a strange sense of calm, a readiness to face whatever came next. She realized that this moment, as painful as it had been, was shaping her in ways practice alone could not. It was building character, resilience, and insight. Her determination solidified into quiet confidence, a knowing that the next performance would not be defined by fear, but by mastery and self-expression. The backstage area was a flurry of movement, with contestants preparing, teachers guiding, and assistants managing schedules. Yet amidst the chaos, she found her center. She reviewed the critique in her mind, not as condemnation, but as a roadmap to improvement. She knew which notes needed more precision, which phrases required more feeling, and which moments demanded courage. Every correction became an opportunity to rise higher. The tension from the earlier embarrassment began to transform into a sense of purpose. She understood that humiliation, while painful, could also be a motivator, a force that pushed her beyond her comfort zone and forced her to confront the parts of herself that needed growth. The maestro's words, once sharp and cutting, now felt like a challenge rather than a condemnation. She embraced it, letting it drive her focus, sharpen her skills, and strengthen her resolve. By the time the day was ending, she had reviewed her performance countless times in her mind, replaying each section, refining each movement, and imagining the sound she would create next time. The embarrassment she had felt earlier had not disappeared, but it had been transformed. It was no longer a wound. It was a fuel, a force propelling her forward. She understood that this was not the end, but a beginning, a turning point that would define her journey as a musician. And deep inside, she felt a quiet, unwavering belief that she had the ability to rise above humiliation, to turn criticism into growth, and to show the world, and the maestro, the full depth of her talent. After the humiliation on stage, the teenage girl retreated to a quiet corner of the backstage area. Her heart still thumped from the tension and embarrassment, but her mind was alert, searching for any way to regain control. She knew that letting the maestro's words linger too long would only weigh her down. Instead, she focused on the music, trying to analyze it from every angle. While speaking quietly with one of the assistant teachers, she overheard a conversation about the maestro's past. It was mentioned casually that he had once struggled with a particular piece during a crucial performance years ago. The piece was known for its complexity, demanding not just technical skill but emotional depth, and it had given even the maestro a hard time in his younger years. A spark ignited in the girl's mind. Could this be the opportunity she had been waiting for? She remembered seeing the sheet music for that very piece on the list for the upcoming round. The thought that she might perform something the maestro himself had found difficult was both thrilling and intimidating. She knew she could not underestimate the challenge. She spent the next hours immersing herself in research. She looked up recordings, analyzed performances, and studied the nuances that made the piece demanding. Every note had to be understood, not just played. She practiced slowly at first, focusing on precision, then gradually increased her tempo, paying attention to the musicality and emotion required. Each mistake became a learning opportunity, and each successful section reinforced her confidence. The complexity of the piece forced her to examine her technique in ways she had never done before. She noticed little habits that needed correction, subtle inconsistencies in timing, and minor gaps in her understanding of the phrasing. It was painstaking work, but it also became exhilarating. The girl felt herself growing with every practice session, her fingers gaining strength and control, her mind becoming sharper. She realized that this challenge could elevate her playing to a new level if she approached it with focus and determination. As she practiced, she also visualized the maestro's reactions. She imagined his critical gaze, the sharpness of his words, and how she could respond not with fear, but with skill and poise. Each rehearsal included mental preparation, building not just technical ability, but confidence, resilience, and stage presence. She began to understand the power of preparation, the way familiarity with the piece could transform anxiety into mastery. Days passed, and her dedication never wavered. She continued practicing, reviewing recordings, and analyzing her own performances. The other contestants noticed her dedication, some offering encouragement, others silently observing her progress. The girl found herself inspired by the journey itself, enjoying the way the music spoke to her, and the way she could express herself through it. The piece was demanding, requiring a perfect balance between strength and delicacy. She realized that to master it, she had to connect with the music on an emotional level, not just mechanically play the notes. She spent long hours imagining the story behind the piece, feeling the rhythm, and allowing her heart to guide her hands. She visualized each section, practicing how she would enter, how she would build tension, and how she would release it to create a full, compelling performance. She also paid attention to breathing, posture, and mental focus. The more she practiced, the more confident she became, realizing that mastery came not just from technical skill, but from understanding, emotion, and presence. One evening, she decided to perform the piece for her teacher in a mock recital. The room was quiet, and she played with everything she had learned. The notes were precise, the phrasing expressive, and the emotion real. When she finished, her teacher smiled, impressed by her growth. "You've taken this piece further than I imagined," they said. "You understand it not just technically but emotionally. You're ready." The girl felt a surge of pride and determination. She knew that the upcoming performance would be a true test, but she also knew she had prepared thoroughly. She reviewed the notes in her mind, imagining the flow of the music from start to finish. She practiced small sections repeatedly, ensuring she could execute them flawlessly under pressure. The fear of the maestro's scrutiny still lingered, but it no longer paralyzed her. Instead, it became a motivator, reminding her why she had worked so hard and what she wanted to achieve. She understood that the maestro's previous failure with the piece added a layer of psychological challenge, but also a unique opportunity. If she could play it perfectly, she could demonstrate not only her technical skill but also her depth, insight, and courage. Over the next few days, she continued refining her performance. She experimented with subtle variations in expression, learning how to convey the music's emotion while maintaining technical precision. She rehearsed in front of mirrors, listening critically, and imagining herself on the stage. Every practice session strengthened her control over the instrument and her confidence in herself. The girl also took moments to rest and reflect. She understood that balance was key, that overexertion could diminish performance. She allowed herself breaks, walks, and quiet time to absorb the music, to let it become part of her. Gradually, the piece became not just notes on a page, but a story she could tell through her instrument. The night before the performance, she played the piece one final time in an empty room, imagining the hall filled with the audience and the maestro's gaze upon her. She felt a calm focus, a quiet readiness, and a connection to the music that transcended nerves or fear. She knew she was prepared technically, emotionally, and mentally. Her heart still raced with anticipation, but it was the racing of excitement, not panic. She had turned what had once been humiliation into fuel, what had once been a challenge into a path toward growth. She felt a sense of gratitude for the difficult moments that had pushed her to this point, realizing that every struggle had strengthened her resolve. When she finally rested that night, she slept with the music echoing in her mind, feeling confident, prepared, and ready for the next step. The discovery of the maestro's past difficulty with the piece had transformed her approach. It had given her focus, motivation, and a clear path to preparation. She understood that the challenge was not just in the music, but in facing the scrutiny of someone renowned for their exacting standards. This awareness made her practice more deliberate, her interpretation deeper, and her confidence stronger. On the day of the performance, she arrived early, checking her instrument, reviewing the sheet music, and mentally walking through every part of the piece. The audience filled the hall once again, and the lights shone brightly on the stage. The other contestants were ready, but she felt centered, calm, and prepared. She knew that the moment would require everything she had practiced, but she also knew that she could rise to the occasion. As she waited for her turn, she reflected on the journey. The embarrassment, the lessons learned, the hours of practice, and the emotional connection she had developed with the music. Each moment had shaped her, built her, and prepared her to face not just the piece, but the maestro with skill and poise. When her name was called, she walked to the stage with a quiet confidence. She placed her hands on the keys, felt the texture of the instrument, and closed her eyes briefly, letting the music flow through her. She knew this was more than a performance. It was a demonstration of everything she had learned, a testament to her resilience, and a chance to show the depth of her talent. Every note, every phrase, every emotion was ready to be expressed. She took a deep breath, opened her eyes, and began to play, fully prepared to transform challenge into triumph. The day of the performance arrived with a quiet intensity. The teenage girl stepped into the hall once again, her heart steady with a mix of anticipation and determination. She had practiced relentlessly, and now it was time to see if all the preparation could be translated into a flawless performance. The audience was already seated, the air filled with a hushed expectation that made every footstep sound louder. She felt a surge of energy, not nervousness, but focus, as she walked onto the stage. The lights were bright, and for a moment she let them blur her surroundings. She centered herself, placing her hands on the instrument, feeling the familiar texture beneath her fingers. Her eyes scanned the audience, and finally, they met the maestro's. He sat there, upright and attentive, his expression unreadable, waiting for her to begin. She took a deep breath, closing her eyes for a second, letting the music flow through her. Then she pressed the keys, and the first notes emerged, soft and precise, filling the hall with a gentle resonance. She moved seamlessly into the more challenging sections, her fingers dancing with confidence. Every note, every pause, every rise and fall of the melody was executed with precision and care. She allowed herself to feel the music, to let it guide her hands, blending technique with emotion. The audience listened in rapt attention. Some leaned forward, captivated by the contrast between her small frame and the strength of her playing. She could feel the energy of the room, a quiet support that wrapped around her and gave her courage. The maestro's eyes were fixed on her, sharp and calculating, but the edge of surprise began to appear. He had seen many performances, but there was something different about this one. The music was flowing flawlessly, yet it was more than just correct notes. It carried feeling, interpretation, and a subtle mastery that went beyond the page. She reached the section that had given the maestro trouble years ago. Every note demanded focus and control, and she executed them with careful precision. Her fingers flew over the keys, strong yet delicate, firm yet expressive. She felt the music in her chest, in her hands, in her mind, every part of her moving with it as one. The hall was silent except for the notes, a perfect stillness that amplified the power of her performance. Every chord, every phrase, every pause was intentional, deliberate, and alive. The teenage girl felt herself becoming part of the music, and the music becoming part of her. She moved through the piece with a combination of control and freedom, respecting its structure but allowing herself to interpret it, to speak through it, and to convey the emotion that lay behind it. As she approached the finale, she felt a swell of emotion, a combination of triumph and release. The audience, sensing the depth and perfection of the performance, leaned in even closer, captivated. Her hands glided across the keys, bringing the final notes to life, soft and powerful, delicate yet complete. When the last note faded into silence, the room remained still for a heartbeat, as if holding its breath. Then, slowly, applause began to rise, tentative at first, then swelling into a loud, enthusiastic ovation. The teenage girl felt a rush of relief and pride. She opened her eyes, scanning the audience, and saw faces filled with admiration and amazement. But she also looked at the maestro. His expression had changed, a flicker of surprise giving way to something she had not expected. Respect. He leaned back slightly, processing what he had just witnessed. For the first time, she saw him smile faintly, a nod of acknowledgement that went beyond words. The maestro's previous criticism and his reputation for exacting standards seemed to have softened in the face of her mastery. The audience continued to clap, some rising to their feet, and she could feel the warmth of their appreciation washing over her. She had not just played the piece. She had owned it, bringing her own understanding, emotion, and technique to every note. Backstage, the assistant teachers and other contestants looked on with admiration. Many were inspired, recognizing the amount of dedication and courage it took to perform so flawlessly under pressure. She felt a quiet sense of accomplishment, a deep satisfaction in knowing that her hard work and perseverance had paid off. The maestro finally spoke, his voice carrying across the hall. "That was extraordinary," he said, sincere and deliberate. "You have mastered the piece in a way I never imagined possible. Your understanding, your technique, and your emotion are remarkable." The teenage girl felt her chest swell with pride and relief. The validation was not just about the applause or the praise. It was about proving to herself that she could rise above doubt, criticism, and fear. The rest of the audience joined in a renewed standing ovation. Cameras captured every moment, every expression, documenting the triumph for all to see. She took a deep breath, letting the applause and acknowledgement sink in. In that moment, the years of practice, the struggles, the mistakes, the moments of self-doubt, all of it felt worth it. She realized that the journey itself, with every challenge and every triumph, had shaped her as a musician and as a person. The maestro approached her after the performance, his demeanor calm but respectful. "You have proven not just your skill, but your courage," he said. "Many would have faltered, but you rose to the occasion with grace and mastery." She nodded, grateful for the recognition, but also quietly proud of herself for having believed in her own potential. The experience had transformed her understanding of music, performance, and self-confidence. She had turned humiliation into motivation, challenge into opportunity, and preparation into triumph. The audience and the judges continued to discuss her performance long after she left the stage. Whispers of admiration and awe spread throughout the hall. Fellow contestants approached her, offering congratulations, and she realized that her courage and dedication had inspired others as well. That night, after the applause had faded and the hall emptied, she sat quietly in her room, reflecting on the journey that had led to this performance. She thought of the maestro's sharp words during the earlier round, the small mistakes, the doubts, and the hours of preparation that had followed. Every moment had been part of a larger story, leading to a performance that felt both personal and triumphant. She smiled softly, realizing that she had not just played a piece of music. She had told a story, faced a challenge, and discovered the strength within herself. She knew that there would be more performances, more challenges, and more opportunities to grow, but this one would always stand out. It had been the moment when she proved to herself and to the world that talent, dedication, and courage could overcome fear and criticism. And as she drifted off to sleep, the notes of the piece played softly in her mind, a reminder of her triumph, her growth, and the power of believing in oneself. After the performance, the teenage girl stepped off the stage with a sense of calm triumph. The applause still echoed through the hall, but now it carried a deeper meaning. It was not only the acknowledgement of her skill, but also the recognition of her courage, dedication, and resilience. As she walked backstage, she was met with smiles and congratulations from teachers, peers, and fellow contestants. Some had watched her rise from the earlier humiliation to this extraordinary performance and felt inspired. The maestro, who had initially been critical, approached her with a calm, deliberate pace. His expression was a mixture of respect and admiration. "Your performance today was remarkable," he said. "You have shown not only technical mastery but emotional depth and courage. Many would have faltered, but you have risen above every challenge." His words, once so cutting, now felt like a seal of approval that validated years of effort and perseverance. The teenage girl nodded quietly, a mixture of pride and humility in her chest. She understood that this recognition was not just about public praise. It was a confirmation that her hard work, persistence, and belief in herself had brought her to this moment. The audience continued to buzz, many discussing her performance in low, excited tones. Cameras captured her expressions, her gestures, and the admiration of those around her. She felt a sense of connection with everyone in the hall, realizing that her journey had touched more lives than she had imagined. Backstage, the girl reflected on how far she had come. The humiliation she had faced during the previous round had seemed unbearable at the time, yet it had become a pivotal point in her growth. Every moment of doubt and every sharp critique had fueled her determination, forcing her to focus, refine, and elevate her abilities. The lesson was clear. Failure and criticism could be powerful teachers when met with resilience and a willingness to learn. Her teachers guided her to a quiet corner, praising her dedication and the depth of her performance. They spoke of her growth not just as a musician, but as a person capable of handling pressure, disappointment, and public scrutiny with grace. She felt a wave of gratitude for their support, realizing that she had not walked this path alone. Outside the hall, reporters and photographers waited, eager to capture the story of her triumph. She answered their questions with a calm poise, speaking honestly about the challenges she had faced, the lessons she had learned, and the importance of perseverance. Her story resonated, inspiring others to embrace their own challenges and to recognize that growth often comes from facing discomfort and adversity. In the following days, her performance became widely discussed. Videos circulated online, showing her skill, composure, and emotional expression. People admired not only her technical ability but also her courage to overcome public humiliation and transform it into triumph. The teenage girl received messages from aspiring musicians, parents, and educators, all expressing how her journey had encouraged them. She felt a sense of responsibility and pride, knowing that her experience could inspire others to persevere in their own endeavors. The maestro, who had once humiliated her, now spoke of her performance in professional circles with respect. He shared how her interpretation of the piece had surpassed his own understanding in many ways, demonstrating the power of dedication, insight, and passion. The girl realized that recognition and validation could come from unexpected places, and that true accomplishment was not only about winning but about growth, learning, and the courage to face challenges head-on. As the competition continued, she continued to refine her skills, but the experience had given her a new perspective. She understood that setbacks were not permanent, that criticism could be constructive, and that perseverance and dedication were essential in achieving excellence. Every time she played, she felt a deeper connection to the music, to her instrument, and to herself. The journey had taught her that mastery was not just about technique, but about understanding, expression, and resilience. Friends and fellow contestants approached her, expressing admiration for her determination and focus. Many shared their own struggles and how her example motivated them to continue pursuing their goals. She realized that success could inspire others, creating a ripple effect of encouragement, support, and ambition. The teenage girl also reflected on the role of humility and gratitude. While the recognition and applause were affirming, she knew that true growth came from continual learning, from embracing challenges, and from approaching every performance with dedication and authenticity. She made a promise to herself to remain grounded, to continue honing her craft, and to approach every opportunity with focus and heart. Over time, she participated in more performances, each one building on the lessons learned from her pivotal triumph. She grew not only in skill but in confidence, resilience, and emotional intelligence. She approached each challenge with a calm focus, understanding that the journey itself was as important as the destination. Looking back, she realized that the humiliation she had once feared had been a turning point. It had forced her to confront doubt, refine her technique, and develop a deeper connection to the music. The experience had taught her that adversity was not an end, but a catalyst for growth, and that courage and perseverance could turn even the harshest criticism into opportunity. The maestro continued to be a presence in her career, offering guidance and acknowledging her progress. Their relationship evolved from one of critique to mutual respect. She learned that even the most formidable critics could become mentors when approached with dedication, humility, and openness. As she matured, the teenage girl carried the lessons from that day into every aspect of her life. She approached challenges with resilience, setbacks with patience, and achievements with humility. The journey had shaped her character, strengthened her resolve, and deepened her understanding of herself and her craft. Ultimately, she realized that the most important triumph was not just the applause or recognition, but the personal growth, self-discovery, and unwavering commitment to her passion. Her story became a testament to the power of resilience, the importance of perseverance, and the enduring impact of embracing challenges with courage and heart. She had faced humiliation, turned it into motivation, mastered a demanding piece, and won the respect of the maestro and the admiration of all who witnessed her journey. In the end, she understood that true success was measured not only by skill, but by the strength of character, the depth of passion, and the ability to rise above obstacles. And as she continued her journey as a musician, every note she played carried the echo of that triumph, a reminder that courage, dedication, and belief in oneself could transform any challenge into a story of lasting inspiration.